Or you're sharing?
No, you go ahead. You can drive from there. That's no problem.
I'll control the clicker just for the start. Okay, welcome everybody to the WIMSE meeting today. Justin is online. I am at the front. I'm Peter Castleman, and Heather has kindly joined to help me with the logistics and any other issues that might occur. So thank you, Heather. So maybe we'll just, we are running a very tight agenda today, so we're going to be fairly strict on time. So if we cut you off, it's not because we don't want to hear what you have to say, but we want to be fair and give everybody a fair opportunity to participate. First of all, the note well. If you are a regular IETF participant, you're familiar with this.
So Peter, actually, if we could go back to the note well real quick. I just want to make a special note that this does include your behavior and interaction with your peers and colleagues here. That is a very important part of the note well. So please keep this in mind as we continue these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Be kind. Some meeting tips for folks. So please use the Meet Echo tool, sign in, raise your hand, and join the queue. If you have a question and there's time, please go up to the microphone just to make things move a little bit quicker. So here we are, workload identity in multi-system environments. Yaroslav, you were correct. And our agenda for today, as you can see, pretty tight. We're going to start off by focusing on current working group drafts to get updates on that, and then a topic on WIMSE and agentic AI from Yaron. And then I think the next set of work, some proposed related work that may or may not be adopted eventually. The first step is really to give everybody an opportunity to introduce the work to the working group and get a sense of whether this is something that people will be interested in pursuing. And then we'll close with any other business. Thank you. All right, so chair updates. Justin.
Yeah, so once again, your chair has been reupholstered. I am now at MongoDB, and which is actually physically where I am today, down in New York City. Unfortunately, that meant I couldn't make it out to Madrid with you guys. But yeah, it's in practical terms, once again, doesn't change the commitment to the working group and how we're doing things. And I will just take note that Peter managed to keep a job for more than a year, so he's still at Spiral. But we are going to continue to run this group as we always have, and my new position is very aware of the work that I'm doing here, and it's even more related than where I was previously. So really looking forward to where we're going there.
All right. Thanks, Justin. I too am glad to still be employed. Thank you. All right, working group resources, the mailing list. So again, this is a good place to raise issues, have discussions. GitHub, of course, GitHub issues. And then our wonderful website, which has loads of entry points to lots of different pieces. Current working group documents, we have 3, the architecture, workload identity practices, and workload to workload authentication documents, and we'll get updates on all of these today. And some other proposed and ongoing work that is relevant to this community or that we've observed. So workload identifier scope hint for TLS client hello. Trust on first use with SPIFFE, that will be an OAuth, SPIFFE with dynamic client registration, another OAuth draft, SPIFFE auth for OAuth clients, another OAuth draft, and yesterday there was the bot auth BOF, and there is a follow-on site meeting tomorrow, no, Thursday, for folks who are interested. Thursday. There's also an agentic or an AI side meeting that unfortunately collides with this meeting. So thank you for everybody that prioritized this work.
And I just want to note that that is specifically all work that is not being presented on today, even though we have an absolutely packed schedule. There's a lot going on in the workload identity and security space and the spaces immediately around it. So yeah, lots of stuff ramping up in the WIMSE world, and excited to have you guys here.
All right, and let's see. Is that us? That is
yeah,
us.
that's us. So
we are mildly on time. So next up,
I believe Arndt has the first presentation. Oh wait, it's workload to workload. Is that Yaron? That's Yaron. Okay.
Workload to workload.
So yeah, I'm Yaron Schiffer. Brian will be presenting with me, and Joe and Arndt will not be presenting today, but are part of the team. So this is about our protocol document that's made significant progress since Bangkok. We'll be discussing that, going into some of the open issues, and then talking about next steps. What has changed since Bangkok? We published 3 versions of the document. More strictness about the signature algorithm to prevent some of the misuse that has happened in the past with JOTs. Replay protection for both of the WIPIT option and the HTTP signature option that we support for workload to workload security. Joe happens to be on the architecture document as well, so that made it easy to consolidate the language. There's still more work to be done between this document and the architecture document that's ongoing. Added content digest, so a signature of the body is mandatory in HTTP signatures. Generic wording ongoing beyond HTTP. This document is still very much focused on HTTP and specifically REST APIs. Added IANA considerations. There's quite a few, turns out. And one more IANA consideration that we will discuss today. Workload terminology and validation of identifiers. That's actually quite important. So last time we talked about the audience and how does the recipient validate that the WIPIT is actually targeted at them. So we gave it one more iteration. There's now some more serious mandatory language about validation of identifiers. Please take a look. Any clarifying questions before we move into open issues? All right. Thank you for Brian, who can always catch us at our best. First one is easy. There are some implementations of this protocol out there. If you have one that you're willing to share about, even if it is proprietary, and you can only share at a very high level, that would still be appreciated. Please send us email. Multiple workload identities. So there is an open issue on GitHub on can we have multiple identities for the same workload, and how that interacts with the authentication, with the security mechanism being used. So the current resolution is we don't know what the use case is for multiple auth methods in general in the same trust domain. Maybe for migration, I don't know. We will not forbid it, but between service A and service B, so between two particular workloads, we require that you use only one authentication method. And then the question becomes, if I'm a service and I'm using a certificate for mutual TLS with one workload, and then I'm using WITs and WIPITs with another workload, do we enforce or do we require some kind of correlation between the identities that, that the service presents to both sides? Still open, still unresolved. Feedback is most welcome.
Yaron, do you want that feedback now?
Yes.
Yep.
But until then, I will go on. Define security goals. A reviewer, to remain anonymous, asked us to add security goals, enough security goals to be able to actually formally validate the protocol. At the moment, there are none. It's kind of trivial that it needs to be done. It's quite difficult to actually do it in a serious way. Our question is, are the protocols out there, IETF or not, from which we could learn how to do that? Justin.
Yeah, so this is something that it came up in a SAG discussion on relationship to formal analysis a couple of years ago as well. And my advice to the authors is to think of it in terms of security properties that this provides, or goals that it wishes to provide, as opposed to trying to spell out everything that a formal analysis would mean. So does this provide non-repudiation? Does it provide replay protection? Does it provide, like, what are the goals of the properties for this? And at that level, I think that there's a lot of stuff that's already in the draft that can be sort of directly tied to those specific goals. So it's kind of extracting that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I should point out, it's kind of obvious to people who've read the draft, we have different security goals for the different solutions, for the different security mechanisms.
So
Peter.
Yeah, so I think that is fine, having different goals for different parts of the document, right? So it's just to be clear about it. What I would recommend is maybe reach out to the team that did the FAPI analysis and get an idea from them on one would write such security goals, or what would help. And they may have some ideas or other examples where they've seen that done before.
Thank you.
Somewhat you addressed in. So could you clarify to us how are the changes compared to standard protocols? Let's say, what are the kind of changes you are making to, let's say, kind of the key exchange part or the authentication part from some well-known protocols, for instance, would be easier to understand. And to comment on what Justin said, I would say the way we formally think of this is that security properties are more formal than security goals. At least the way we view it in UFMRG is that security goals are high-level properties or high-level objectives, sorry, not properties. So that's how we view it. They are informal, so non-repudiation and all that, authentication, and similarly, they are more of security goals. I wouldn't call them properties. Properties is something that we have formalized, which is if client has accepted the connection, let's say in TLS terminology, the server has executed something or server has actually run this specific session. So what I mean to say is that security goal is more abstract than a security property. That's how at least the formal community views that. And I would say at least the least a draft should do for the implementers as well should be that it should lay out the security goals that I can achieve from the draft. That would at least help the implementers understand that what can I gain from this. That would be my suggestion, that the minimal it should do is this one.
Thank you, Osama. So surprisingly, we are using the correct term here, security goals, and you should not expect anything beyond security goals. Next. Yeah, so while working on IANA considerations, we started debating whether we need to have our own URI scheme. So if you're using SPIFFE, then you would have a URI denoting your identity, the workload's identity, starting with SPIFFE colon. But not everybody is using SPIFFE, and we assume that people will be using WIMSE with whatever authentication infrastructure. And so it probably makes sense to define our own URI scheme. Even though all we are saying is that the identity is a URI, we basically, well, we have few constraints, but not much on the URI. So feedback is welcome. Yaroslav.
Well, I'll speak a little bit about schemes in my proposal for separate identifier document in a little bit, but one concern that I have specifically about WIMSE scheme, scheme means something. So when we're speaking about SPIFFE, there are certain things that SPIFFE does and doesn't do. And if somebody implements a different way to obtain workload identity that could be, let's say, AWS specific or GCP specific or something else specific, they would come up, hopefully, with their own scheme, but that would include, hopefully, trust domain and scheme specific path. Having WIMSE as a scheme as a somewhat meaningless placeholder, I'm not sure if that's the right way forwards, because then the question will be, oh, so what does it actually mean? How do I obtain a WIMSE scheme identifier? What security properties of it are? So I'm not sure if that's the right way forward.
Okay, to me it means I'm going to use it in WIMSE, and that's about it. Otherwise, you would have to make up your own scheme, and that doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an abstraction, right? We're not specifying what the scheme is. We're just saying that this is workload identifier.
Yeah.
And just having WIMSE as the default placeholder for the sake of placeholder will confuse.
Well, it's not necessarily a placeholder. I can imagine people will actually be using it in real deployments rather than coming up with their own scheme where they don't have to.
I see.
So I think maybe this is a good conversation to continue, Yaroslav, as part of your draft. An observation, I think the moment you have a WIMSE example in there, people will use it.
And we do, actually.
And people, and then the natural next questions can be, what does it mean, right? So I think let's maybe table this part of the discussion for continuation. But the concerns noted. Thank you, Yaroslav.
So, okay, in the little bit of a refresher, in the WIPIT, we have constructs to include the hash of other contextual or authorization providing tokens. Because we know about their existence, you could put a hash of a OAuth access token as your sort of authorization context in the WIPIT and kind of bind that into the whole transaction, or sorry, the point-to-point transaction, or to include, we have one for a transaction token as well, because that's something that's at least being developed right now. What we don't know about is all the other ways people might pass tokens representing the external or even internal sort of authorization context of the request, but we wanted to provide sort of similar constructs to be able to bind that thing or things into the WIPIT as part of the signing over it, sorry. And so I came up with this horrible construct that is OTH, which is a claim, meaning other token hash. And a lot of questions have come up about, is that really sufficient? Is it a good thing? And saying in here that I don't think it's a very good construct at all. And the question of whether to allow for multiple tokens came up, which I hijacked into a thread of saying, well, we need to at least reconsider this initial construct. And so ultimately, trying to go fast, what I am proposing right now is, short of dropping the construct entirely, which feels like people sort of want it, is to change the OTH claim from a single hash of some unknown, unqualified token that might or might not be there to a JSON object, which is itself a map of token names named by the HTTP header to a hash of that particular token itself. So just trying to show this by example here, you have the claims from the WIPIT on the left, you have the OTH claim at the bottom, and then you see in there the name corresponding to the header name in the HTTP request and a hash over the content of that token, with no special logic for multiple appearances of it, no special logic for like normalizing or canonicalizing or doing anything with it. The expectation is there's a single HTTP header that is a name and a value, and you take the value and you hash it and you roll that up into your WIPIT. This would be sort of at least providing a little bit more, I don't know, I don't even know how to qualify this. Trying to simplify it, trying to make the construct a little bit less awkward, but still somewhat useful by providing named value and multiples rather than just sort of an unnamed value construct, and avoiding any sort of anything with appending tokens, multiple tokens of the same name, or any such. So, good.
Hi, Thibaut Meunier, Cloudflare. What you're proposing here, once again, you may have specific requirements, seems very similar to what HTTP message signature provides. Is this to have a retrofit within a job?
No, absolutely not. So this is a hope. And the last time we talked about this, it got bogged down into how do we make this work like HTTP signatures.
Okay.
I do not want to reinvent HTTP signatures here. I want to avoid the appearance of even trying, which I apparently have failed at. But it's meant to be a very, very simple construct to provide a little bit of integrity over some other token that just happens to appear in an HTTP header, because we're doing HTTP here, by name and value. Nothing canonicalizing or normalizing any of the headers, nothing accounting for different constructs or appearances of the header, nothing accounting for the body of the request, should there be one, anything like that. So you're right, there is an appearance, but it's...
Okay, you want to make it simpler.
Yes, I want to make it very, very simple.
Get it.
Justin?
Yeah, very quick. I would recommend to the authors to, instead of pointed HTTP headers, define a semantic mapping of this is the token value and this is the named token value, and then have some sort of registered construct for getting that token value instead of trying to refer to HTTP headers, so that you can get out of this space entirely. If the token construct is go read this header and get the token value from that as defined by that token's specification, then you're pretty much doing the same thing, but semantically sidestepping a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
And I
so
can make that comment in the issue.
So that's more or less what we've done, I think.
Okay.
Well, for tokens that we know about, that you can
Right.
say, point to the specifications, transaction tokens, and an authorization token, basically a bearer OAuth token. But I don't know how to do that in the absence of something being defined. So the only sort of semantic thing I had to grab onto was the name of the header that carries the token.
Yeah, I recommend not using that as a fall through, because of all of the dragons that are in HTTP headers. But we don't need to hash this here.
Maybe we can take that offline.
Yep.
We are at time. Yaroslav, very quick.
Very quick, more generic comment. I feel there is a really, really significant overlap between this work and WebBot auth. I don't see a reason why this work wouldn't be used in WebBot auth. I would highly encourage authors to reach out to WebBot auth enthusiasts and explore it, so we wouldn't end up with two very similar but competing protocols. Thank you.
I fear you are absolutely correct.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump to the end. We've been talking about trying to get to the working group last call before Montreal. Clearly, because we couldn't even get through the content of this, that's wildly ambitious. But
as chair, how many interims would you need between now and Montreal?
17.
17. Your calendar will be blocked out. Thank you.
Yep, we'll get that on the schedule.
Okay. So we can work on that. Let's get a couple of interims. I think
We can start with 2.
we'll start with 2. I think it's a good goal. Let's get to working group last call by the time we're at Montreal. Thank you. Thank you to the authors.
That was fun.
Okay. Arnold, which one's yours?
Yes.
All right, off you go.
Can I? Hello?
You have the clicker?
I don't, but okay. My name is Arndt. I'm here on behalf of Yaroslav and myself, and I'll give you an update on workload identity practices. So, history of the draft. So it got started October 23, first submitted by Benedict and Hannes, and it had a focus on OAuth 2 assertion framework within Kubernetes. Very specific, and it was named Best Current Practices for OAuth 2.0 Client Authentication in Workload Environments. I believe it was the first draft in WIMSE. Then was IETF 118. We talked about it. There was a lot of conversation in the mailing list. And with 119, we had the BOF for WIMSE, and we got our first review from Andre in between 119 and 120. In 120, we changed the scope and intent quite significantly. We went from a BCP
we did not change it yet, but there was a lot of discussions whether it should be a BCP or an informational draft, and it should define something new or just document something existing, etc. And then by 121, we did make some changes to the scope. So we added other workflow platforms, cloud providers, SPIFFE, continuous deployment and delivery platforms, and so on. We presented that, and then in December, after a discussion on the mailing list again, we did change our intended status and name. So we are not a BCP anymore. It is an informational draft, and it's not called Workload Identity Best Current Practices. We just said Workload Identity Practices, because we do believe there's better practices out there, for example, proof of key procession and so on. And the word current does not make sense because the draft should be there for a while, and current kind of describes a point in time. So we are workload identity practices, and we are not the best practices. We just document what's out there. Yeah, then we got a couple of reviews from D&H Sachs, Ned Smith. By 122, we added one part that was kind of requested, and that is delivery mechanisms. So for example, environment variables, file system, local APIs. And we also describe with each of these platforms what they use. For example, token request API in Kubernetes is a local API, and so on. Protected service account tokens, and file system, etc. And then afterwards, we also got a review from Yaron. Okay, and now we got, shortly before IETF, we got another review from Kathleen, and now we are here. We made one change, and that is we kind of went away from the OAuth 2.0 specifics. I think we mentioned it once, like as an example, but we more talk about generic federation, and that is mainly to accommodate cloud providers that do not use OAuth. So AWS assume role with web identity and GCP equivalent. Yeah, and here we are. I kind of talked about it a bit, like we moved away from the OAuth 2.0 specifics. We moved the specific patterns, Kubernetes, cloud providers, and so on, back into the main document. It used to be in the appendix, but we got review that that is a very helpful part of the document. So we moved it back up to kind of give it more color. We removed the credential format section. There was a bit something covered about short, but we didn't really say anything else that's new. Everything is already in 7523, so there was no value in it. We did talk a bit about OIDC ID token, because some providers, very specific one, CI/CD related, talks about OIDC ID tokens for a workload identity token, and we kind of wanted to reflect that. But we also said, okay, this is like just this specific one, so we kind of got away from it. And some editorial changes. Yeah, this is what the document covers. I talked about it, delivery patterns, practices, security considerations, that's it. Current, not at the moment, current practices. Yeah, and we are getting closer. So please bring in the reviews, bring in your perspectives. We plan on finalizing this document very soon, either one of the 17 interims or 124, and the strong focus is on working group loss. Yeah. Questions? Open mic.
Justin? Oh. Quick question.
I just wanted to make a question to the room. Who here has read the draft in its current state? A few hands. That's good to see. Yeah.
Seven hands.
No, that's really great. So who here is willing to, who hasn't read it yet, is willing to read through the draft and provide any immediate feedback?
We've got a hand, Andy.
I was going to say a couple of tentative hands. So with that and sort of the current state of the draft, the chairs will take that feedback and consider starting a formal working group last call on this when the authors think that it's time to pull that cord, which sounds like it will be soon.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, Justin.
Peter, did you have something to add? Sorry, I kind of.
Oh, I was going to ask if anybody had read the draft.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, thank you, Arndt, and thank you for everybody that's contributed to this document. Looking forward to getting the signal that it's ready for working group last call. Thank you. Joe, that's the WIMSE architecture draft. Is that the latest?
It doesn't say draft.
Oh.
Towards the bottom.
Yeah.
All right. I am presenting on behalf of the authors here on the WIMSE architecture draft. So I think I can go to the next slide. Yes. Okay, changes since the last draft. We haven't had much activity on this since the last draft. We've kind of made some reorganization to the authentication section to break out authorization and audit into their own sections. We added some text on credential theft to security considerations. And then, as you'll find out a little bit later, I'm going to give a little teaser here. There's been some discussion about moving some of the specifics about workload identity, the definitions and the kind of more normative text there, perhaps moving that out into a separate draft that could progress separately, perhaps be in standards track, all of those good things. One thing we have been looking at is kind of looking at the different documents in this space. And in particular, documents that are going through the OAuth working group, like transaction tokens, and looking at how the terminology does or does not align between these documents. The good news is that there is, obviously the documents are talking about a lot of the same things. The concepts are reasonably close. And what we probably need to do is look at where we might need to align, or if there are any differences. For the most part, not necessarily significant differences from my initial reading. Maybe the differences in between a transaction token talks about an authorization context, and the architecture document talks about a security context. They're slightly different scopes, I think. But maybe that's something that we can at least expand on so that we don't confuse people with using two different words. We can still use two different words, but we ought to be clear as to why. There's also some difference between, we use a gateway service, transaction token uses external entry point. Seems to me they're largely the same thing. So maybe we can align terminology there. Yeah. There's probably other things. I didn't get a chance to go through the identity chaining document before this meeting, but I think it'll probably be similar from my past readings of that document. If you have a question, please. Yeah.
I do, Anshang Schuster. I had the chance today to read both of them, and I noticed that transaction token talks about the workload as a unit, and it does not really talk about whether it's an instant or something like similar instances, while the architecture talks about a very specific instance of a workload. And I just wanted to mention that because it is a different, and I feel like there's value in having two terms for it, particularly for other drafts where it's relevant, whether it's a specific instance or just a logical term of the same instance running multiple times. Sort of.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because that's something we've discussed within the architecture draft. I don't think we necessarily intend it to be for an instance. It's certainly, in discussions that we've had in the past, some people think of, well, I have an instance, meaning like I could have many replicas of the same software running, and each of those could be a unique identity. or I could treat all of those as the same logical identity, because they are all essentially the same thing within my system. And so this is probably an area which we could do a little bit better, either in the identity document or in the architecture document. Perhaps it's more of a, well, I don't know. I think that deserves a little more discussion, because it also kind of shapes how you would do authorization and a bunch of other things going forward, and audit, and maybe there's, we should differentiate between those two terms, I think, and be more explicit about it. So I think that's a great call out. Anybody else have any thoughts on terminology? All right, Yaroslav.
Yaroslav, yes, I do agree that this is a great call out. In some cases, we do care that it's a single instance. In some cases, we care more of a functional building block. In other cases, it's either. So we need to be very precise in terms of our definition. Now, where do we put this definition, in architecture or elsewhere? I don't think that's super important at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's something we could work out, but I think we do need to make that distinction. All right, so just because this document didn't want to feel left out, maybe we can get to working group last call by Montreal. And how we would do this is really trying to scope, the document to cover kind of the current set of things that we're working on now within this group, which would be service to service auth and the workload practices, or the workload identity practices draft. And that way, I think we could, kind of scope out maybe some of the areas of the document. They could still be in there, but just we wouldn't be trying to flesh them out completely before we would publish. And then we can always do an extension document or V2 of this document of the architecture to then kind of, to keep the architecture moving forward and still kind of publish something as a meaningful milestone. To get there, we'd have to resolve some of these open issues, such as the one Arndt brought up. And then there are, some things that we may really need to add. I think terminology alignment, especially with OAuth and looking through the SPIFFE documents, making sure that we're not introducing too much confusion. We probably need a little bit more in the security considerations. Then there are a bunch of sections that we have that I'm not sure if we need to fill out in great detail at this point. Perhaps they need a little bit more detail to define a space where these things can fit in, such as attestation and delegation, impersonation. Maybe there are other things. But right now, we don't have a lot of solutions specified in those spaces coming from our working group. But, so I would say, let's see if we can get those, just the things we need, and then maybe publish. Yeah, and so maybe we can get a couple of those 17 interims to work through some architecture things. Usama, I think I saw you in the queue.
So yes, go ahead, Usama.
Yep.
So just a clarification question. So what exactly is attestation being used here for? Can we, so did you mean actually to remove attestation at all? Or did you mean that you keep whatever is in the text there and then not add something else to it?
So yeah, very similar to the second statement. It would probably be keeping what's the kind of the scope of what's there and just making sure we define it well at a high level, right? Not trying to, kind of defining the box, maybe that attestation is, right? What it is.
Yeah.
And not trying to get into all of the different details of, it could be this thing or that thing or the, very specific things at this point. and reserving that for a later point in the life cycle of this working group.
Right. So if I could just quickly point out.
Salma, I wonder if we can take this offline.
Okay, sure.
We're at time. Hank, very quickly, do you have a quick thing to add?
Yeah, hi, this is Hank. Just highlighting that if you're not clearing this up, it will just be a detriment to the effort again, like everywhere. So I'm just saying, yes, clear it up. Later the process is fine, but now it's already too late.
Or we can also not talk about attestation at all. That's, that might be even better.
I see double thumbs up. All right. Thank you to the authors. Please reach out to the chairs and let us know when you need interim scheduled, and we will get that done. Thank you.
Yeah, on that note, so the chairs are taking note of the large number of interims that people want to schedule. I do want to encourage folks to not wait for an interim to get work done. There's a lot of stuff that we can do asynchronously, and that is traditionally how the IETF has done a large portion of its work. So please keep cranking on things like that. That said, there's a lot of value for a synchronous conversation, especially when you need to discuss things in detail and do that type of thing. So we're more than happy to schedule some interims. I just want to make sure that we aren't leaning on that as a magic bullet to fix momentum for these drafts. And next up, Yaron.
All right, Yaron.
Yeah, thank you. Could you add that 20 minutes or whatever?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to thank the chairs for letting me talk about agentic AI. It's not an actual document. And in fact, I have too many slides. And the important part is to get us started with a discussion about what's WIMSE, or is WIMSE going to do anything about agentic AI, and if so, what? So I will give some background, but again, main thing is the discussion. So agentic AI is a buzzword, but it's also real. It's being adopted by actual real companies for real features, real products that are out there facing the customer. It's starting with text-related applications that were nearly impossible to do with the previous generation, so maybe a year ago of LLM applications. We're using agents to steer the algorithm or to ensure correctness. So it's enabling new features. It's also perceived, at least perceived, and possibly it's correct, perceived to be easier to write agents compared to traditional applications or even traditional applications with LLMs. Agentic AI is very broad. There's no one common definition. And so instead, I'll talk about the properties. It's obviously LLM-based. It's usually an iterative process where the agent tries to reach a goal. It's autonomous. So one important property is that you don't define a workflow in advance. The agent basically creates the workflow or decides on its own workflow using, so by reference to the inputs. Agents use tools, or we say they are agentic. They can make changes to the outside world. So they use tools. And if this is the first time you're hearing the word tools, just think of them as APIs. But they can be different things. Agents almost always manage persistence. some sort of memory. And this is important for us, I believe, agents are composite. So in most cases, agent consists of multiple smaller agents, which I will call micro agents. That's a totally made up term, by the way. Next. Why not? Why not use agents? Because LLM applications are subject to vulnerabilities. Most of you have heard of prompt injection. And the more complexity you add on top, the more vulnerabilities. The fact that the agent defines its own workflow, for example, creates yet another attack vector on agents. And again, relevant to us, if you're working with people who develop agents, they always think very big. The agent needs to have like 20 tools, is able to touch all of our APIs and can do whatever we can do with the customer's data or customer's assets. And so this obviously needs to be kept in check. One approach to solving it is to assign parts of the agent more limited permissions.
Yaron, just stand closer to the mic so that people
Sorry.
can hear.
More limited permissions, but there may be other things, and that obviously all falls in our domain. Well-known protocols. MCP is a protocol that many of you have heard about. MCP is typically used between agents and tools. So it basically bridges between textual applications or applications that use English written prompts that the LLM evaluates between this world and the good old world of APIs, schemas, and so on. So this is MCP. It's very widely adopted. However, today it's mostly adopted for IDEs, so for development environments, rather than for your typical services, because those are just emerging. Personally, I think MCP is going to happen in these environments as well. The other famous protocol comes from Google. It's called A2A. I'm not going to discuss it a lot. It's a lot more complicated. It's not well adopted to the best of my knowledge. It may still become so, well, coming from Google. It's also very interesting, and security properties for both of them are not yet very well defined. So as a very high level model, your agent consists of multiple smaller agents, which I call micro agents. They typically would use MCP to talk to an API, to your legacy microservice. They might use A2A to talk to another agent. And in between these micro agents, so today, typically you would be using one framework for all your micro agents. And so communication between them uses very proprietary and often not even network-based channels. But over time, I think it will be network-based. There's no escaping it. And it may become standardized. We're yet to see that. Now, Osama, if you have a clarifying question, let's do it quickly now. Otherwise, we'll do discussion later.
Sure, I'm not sure if it's a clarification question, but I am still not sure what an agent is. What is the defining characteristics that I would say this is an agent and this is not? So what is the litmus test I would have?
So
to make
I
sense of-
think I was very clear that this is unclear.
I mean, in properties, like you were talking in some of those.
So I gave some properties, and if your agent fulfills 73% of these properties, then it's an agent. That's the best I can do.
Okay.
Now, mapping these agents into our WIMSE workloads. And let's use the definition. Agents are AI systems that can autonomously plan and execute complex tasks. That's sort of definition of agents. Within this definition, an agent can be seen as a workload. And let's not forget that in WIMSE, a workload can be composite. So a workload can contain other workloads, and they would each have their own distinct identity. So if you look at your typical micro agent, there would be an LLM call, there would be some computation, there would be tool calls. That all looks very much like a workload. So I would say both the bigger agent, the agent that's, say, I'm your financial advisor, like a big agent that can do many, many things, and your smaller agent, the one that I don't know, can do a single payment or whatever. I think both of them can be considered as WIMSE workloads. If this is the case, can we just use WIMSE as is? My answer is no, because we're missing quite a lot of stuff. Specifically, identity, attestation, and authorization. So very quickly through them. Today, WIMSE workload to workload protocol only covers HTTP and, like your standard HTTP request response. Even MCP does more than that with streaming. Anybody who's worked with an AI UI, an AI thing, knows that streaming is really, really important, and we don't really support streaming at the very basic level today. So something to keep in mind. Workload identity. People who've been around identity for a long time will not be surprised. Agents have many of the complexities of both service identity and human identity and combine them into one beautiful blob. Do we really want to address that? Maybe, maybe not. I think someone needs to. And lastly, attestation. So we still haven't looked at attestation at WIMSE, but it's it's always been on our agenda and hopefully will happen. But our attestation and this attestation is different, and it may actually be more urgent in the agentic space, because we're going to see agents coming from different places and the origin of the agent. So who created it? Who is like approving it, endorsing it, which marketplace perhaps it's coming from. All of these may be important for your security policies. So do we even want to go there in WIMSE? I think these are all things that we need to look at. And yeah, I already mentioned authorization and the problem with large-scale agents that create that come with huge sets of privileges. And so authorization, even minimal authorization, is critical to any kind of secure deployment of these agents. Otherwise, you're simply wide open. Again, we've decided not to dive into authorization in this working group. We're sort of happy with what we have. Is that good enough if we ever want to focus on agentic AI? Maybe, maybe not. That's it. Jaroslav.
So I think one of important questions in terms of whether we should try and tackle it some way, shape, or form or not would really depend on any agentic AI practitioners who are MCP client, who build MCP clients or servers who would be interested in working in WIMSE forum to help solve this issue. Again, at Web.auth yesterday, I think there were people from, at least remotely from OpenAI and other places who were interested in solving the problem of these agents crawling their websites. It's a very different problem that we are potentially trying to solve here. But again, in this room, I'm not sure if we have anybody or could we recruit somebody from that space so that we could collaborate and solve this. I think without having practitioners in this space in the room, well, we can theorize, we can put together some framework, but if it doesn't get adoption, that potentially will be a wasted effort.
I agree with you in principle. However, many people who are building service infrastructure, well, not the vendors, the people who are deploying service infrastructure will also be going into AI. But yes, absolutely.
Gene, can you join the queue?
Sorry,
Thanks.
forgot.
Oh, just the through data trackers. Thank you.
Ant.
Thanks, Aaron, for doing this. I think it's going to be important for us. I don't think WIMSE will be able to solve all these topics, but as you mentioned, but I think in some topics we should be active to do the industry a favor and not having API keys all over the place. And I wanted to point yours and everyone's attention to a draft I'll be presenting to OAuth, which will make SPIFFE workloads, which are also WIMSE workloads, able to communicate to authorization servers in OAuth without a client secret. And that will also enable certain use cases for AI agents. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Arndt. Mohammed?
So on slide 7, you had 3 or 4 characteristics: transport, identity, attestation, and authorization. So to be clear about that, are you saying that these 4 characteristics are absolute essential properties of agentic AI? Is this the correct interpretation?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that these are areas that we have not, or we have covered to a very specific scope in WIMSE. And if we want to go towards a good coverage of agentic AI, we would need to look at them again and maybe expand the work that we're doing. Does it make sense?
I mean, you need these 4 properties that we have not analyzed in order to go to agentic AI, which means to me at least that agentic AI has for these 4 things that we need to move towards that. Is it not the interpretation?
No, well, these are These are things that, these are properties of service networks as well. So everything that we do in WIMSE has transport identity and so forth. Attestation may be question mark, but certainly authorization. What I'm saying is those things look differently when you consider agentic AI.
Okay, Thibault?
Yes, Thibault Meunier, Cloudflare. On your presentation, if I understand correctly, and based on your diagram, you're trying to focus on like these micro agent to micro agent to provide a framework, because there's been a lot of like, I don't know, ground that has been covered, and I would like to understand which work you think should be tackled in this working group.
So I'll give an opinion there, and it's debatable. I think many of the work on MCP and A2A is focused on cross-organization authentication authorization, and that's very appropriate for auth. I think WIMSE will probably be the space where we deal with the internal to the organization and possibly internal to the agent traffic. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay, quick seconding Yaroslav comment, would be good to have like AI agent and MCP practitioners discuss here if this is the right forum.
Just want to note, everybody, we are at time, so please be quick on the mic.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand, like, I look at agentic AI and the stuff they are proposing in the architecture. It's very much, each agent is effectively a workload, if I see that way. So I don't understand why we should distinguish apart from the technical protocols that implement the agentic AI, but the principles look very similar to me.
Sorry, distinguish?
I mean, what we do in workload, effectively every agent in the agentic AI world can be treated as a workload, and all the principles we describe in the workload identity can be applied directly to the agentic AI stuff.
Okay, so I obviously disagree, and I think that, and I tried to explain why in my slides.
I'm just going to be real quick. So I actually agree with all the deficiencies that Aaron described. One of the fundamental reasons why this not typical workload, because it really does need a distinct identity, especially if they start working through the protocols. That's one. And the second part is MCP specifically has not gone through any reviews like we typically do at IETF. It really is pretty much anonymous. And anybody who is anything security conscious are trying to layer this on top with all sorts of other things, which makes it completely not interoperable. So from the standpoint of people who practically deploying that, we are running into this issue all the time. And in order to make it interoperable, people just forgo security. So I think this is one of the best places to actually try and tackle this.
Thanks, Gene.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Andrew McCormick, Ambit. I just want more of a comment than anything. I think that we probably, I don't know if we can solve all of these problems in this working group, but I personally think that we should definitely tackle identity and to an extent attestation. Transport and authorization is a little fuzzier to me, but I think even aside from agentic AI, I think there's a lot of value in going deeper into how to identify and attest a workload that gets a WIMSE credential.
Dmitry Zumsky into it. So I would probably like join like previous part. It's exactly like workload identity can provide fundamental block for agentic identity and probably more granular authorization on top of it, because this is kind of current problem for implementation.
Thank you. Gene, are you still in the queue or are you done? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, thanks, Sharon. And please continue the discussion offline and on the list. This is a hot topic for everybody. So let's figure out what we can do here. Yaroslav. Which one's yours? Yep.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yaroslav, and today, on behalf of Joe and myself, I present Workload Identifier. Now, Workload Identifier is not a new concept. In WIMSE, it was first defined in service-to-service protocol draft. Then they decided that it shouldn't be specific to service-to-service protocol, and it was moved into architecture. But we believe that it is an important enough thing to be moved into a separate document, and I'll share with you some of the rationale for that in just a little bit. So recap, what is Workload Identifier? It's an absolute URI that consists of three parts. You have scheme that defines where this identifier comes from, certain properties of it. Then we have URI authority or trust domain. So that is specifying, the trust domain. And then you have scheme-specific paths. So scheme could be opinionated on what path means, or it could be an opaque organization-specific path for the URI. So as you see here, I have SPIFFE example, and the common question is WIMSE workload identifier the same as SPIFFE? And the answer to that is yes, but actually no. So we use the same format, so scheme, trust domain, path that originally appeared in SPIFFE ID, but scheme doesn't have to be SPIFFE. It could be other things. So as discussed previously, maybe we will be using WIMSE as a placeholder or something that is not specific to any other authorization scheme, but hopefully we will have other schemes in the future. So to summarize, every SPIFFE ID is a valid WIMSE workload identifier, but not every WIMSE workload identifier is a valid SPIFFE ID simply because it could be using other schemes. So now, why do we believe it worth a separate document? So first of all, architecture is informational track. Would be very valuable to have identifier in a standard track document and also have certain definitions in here that others within WIMSE and outside of WIMSE could reference. So it could be workload identifier is important enough to be a dedicated document. And then last but not least, workload identifier we expect it to be stable and not bound to protocol or architecture version. Kathleen.
Kathleen Moriarty. So just a quick question. Have you looked at the glue document in SPICE?
Sorry, could you repeat
Have you
that?
looked at the glue document in SPICE?
I have not. Joe,
So they, part of what SPICE is trying to do is identify patterns right across all these different identity pieces. And glue is trying to provide the unique identifier. And perhaps review on that would be helpful because it might be something that you then refer to for this work. And if they're not correct, correcting them would be great too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so one example I wanted to share where I believe it would be, again, valuable to have WIMSE identifier in a separate document. So there is a work in TLS working group, not yet adopted. Originally, it was just a single MTLS flag. Now, Jonathan Hoyland and I will be proposing a more sophisticated signal. The challenge that we're trying to solve there is do conditional mutual TLS. So today, if you want to do mutual TLS authentication, you effectively have to dedicate a separate endpoint. You cannot combine both mutual TLS and non-mutual TLS on a single endpoint effectively because server always has to issue certificate request, and clients that do not expect certificate request are often confused what that means and how do I react to that. So if we have WIMSE identifier, we could take a part of that WIMSE identifier scheme and trust domain, for example, and include that potentially in client hello, and then server would learn that, oh, it's a workload, and I know that this workload is MTLS friendly, so I'm going to issue certificate request accordingly, or I don't know what this workload is, so I don't know how to authenticate it with certificate. I'm not going to do certificate request and do something else. That's just a usage example where, again, this separate identifier in a separate document would be helpful. So the next step for this work, Evan provided very useful feedback. There are some interesting lessons, security lessons learned from SPIFFE identifier in terms of tightening wording. URLs can be sophisticated things, and that can lead to interesting security vulnerabilities. So we are going to tighten how URL is defined, what kind of characters are allowed in the URL, how long can the URL be. So clean up the usage. Right now it goes a little bit too far and stepping on the toes of service-to-service protocol. So we shouldn't be mentioning JOTs and certificates there. That's what service-to-service is about. Align terminology with other places. And the question is the working group believes that's the right approach? Is it something that working group would like to work on? Any opinions?
Thibaut.
Hi, Roslav. Okay, I will put it a bit up. No, nice presentation. Up as an implementer for the earlier version of the draft, which was in the TLS group. This is, I do think, something like very valuable that serve real use cases. The question I do have is there was some concern within like the TLS working group about like its impact and like how that works for the web. I do think for WIMSE, given the scope is limited to workload, this seems like reasonable. But there's still some like implementation and deployment challenges that like would need to consider, and like happy to help solve that.
Thank you. No more enthusiasts? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Yaroslav. Can we have the clicker, please? Thank you. So next up, we have credential exchange.
Cool, let's do this.
Okay.
Someone in the queue? Is it me?
You are in the queue, but I will remove you. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is WIMSE Credential Exchange. I presented this at the last IETF. This is it again. I do want to encourage everyone who's interested in this topic to join our bi-weekly WIMSE token exchange call. Call us off design team. There's Ken, Andrew, Marcel, myself, and others there. Yeah, so what is WIMSE Credential Exchange? In this document, we're talking about 4 different ways for a workload to get an identity. You would have the old school way, manual. Then you would have the initial platform provisioning. Think about a projected service account token that exists at the start time of the workload. The workload gets born with it. Then you have on-demand platform issuance, and that is the workload deliberately asks the platform to get a credential. Initial platform provisioning, also a good example is environment variables, token environment variables in GitHub and all the others. It starts with the workload and dies with it. On-demand platform issuance is more like you go to the platform, you request it. There's GitHub SDKs, token request API, Kubernetes, etc., or instance metadata documents in cloud providers. And then last but not least, you have an on-demand credential exchange. And that is the workload authenticates itself towards an issuer, maybe with one of these credentials obtained before, and he gets back a credential. Or through token exchange, for example. Why would a workload want to change its identity or change its credential? Change of identity is like the obvious one.
Arndt, there's a request that you're closer to the mic. Just bend it up.
Okay. The other one, it says change of identity. That's a typo. It should be change of issuer. So for example, you have one issuer and you want to maybe get an identity from a different issuer. Change of scope, very common audience downscoping, change of lifetime, change of format, and also missing platform support. So for example, I am Kubernetes, I get a Kubernetes JOT style token, but I need an X509 certificate. Yeah, in this document, I don't want to go into details of this, but in this document, we are trying to apply these rationales to the different mechanisms and give guidance on when you should do what and where you should apply caution. So for example, a change in lifetime, and you change that in the initial platform provisioning credential, you make it as long-lived as possible because you cannot exchange it. In the draft, where there's reasoning and intent behind each of these things, yeah, but this is what we are trying to achieve. And the same thing for, we also look at existing standards, for example, OAuth2 token exchange and OAuth2 assertion flow. And we kind of try to highlight when you should do what and where you should not do certain things. So you should not use the OAuth2 token exchange if you change your authority or your trust domain, aka authorization server. Yeah, so my question to the working group would be, are you guys interested in this work? Is it relevant? Do you see other existing exchange protocols out there? And what would be your next steps? Or yeah, do we want to work on this? Joe.
So I would say yes, because I can't see us really having a workable system without having some sort of token exchange mechanism, you know, not for either kind of federation cases, but also internally, just when you need to change, you know, the scope of your token, or you need to get a token in an asynchronous way or in a kind of scheduled way. I think you will need something like this. I haven't really figured out a way to do it without that. So it would be great to do that and have some standardization around how those interactions work. Yeah, I haven't read your draft yet, so.
Please do.
Dmitry Zumskin. So I clearly also believe it's also useful because usually this work done manually in some cases. In some cases, it's automated or use different pieces. Additional use case, it's rotation of the secrets and credentials that became actually automated work. So, and also it's very useful for distributed deployment. If you have some token exchanges, trust domain deployed in different places, you have to exchange root certificate or some additional credentials.
Okay, thank you.
Just another +1 that I think we should work on this. Obviously, I'm on the design team, so of course I do. But just it's something that I think comes up a lot in implementations at scale and, you know, heterogeneous environments. So I think there's a lot of value in having a definition like this.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yaron Chef, I'm a little bit confused because I'm looking at the draft and it's very much informational best practices kind of thing and not normative. And I'm hearing Mr. Salloway here basically asking that we go ahead and define a protocol. So which one is it?
So in this draft somewhere, we come to the conclusion that it's impossible to define a protocol that matches all the use cases. We think that it would be a mistake to build this silver bullet exchange protocol. In the next topic, we'll get much more concrete about the specific use case. This draft more attempts to
talk about the various patterns. What is an exchange? What isn't, right? Because like exchange could mean anything, right? So we're kind of trying to get wording around it. Maybe the status is wrong. Could very well be. Yeah, it's up to us
So-
what it's going to be.
So do
So
the authors think that some of this needs to be or should be addressed as an actual protocol work?
Yes, but I'm not sure if this document is the right place for it.
Okay.
So I just speaking as chair very quickly, want to remind people that this is not a call for adoption of any particular document. This is a discussion of the topic to gauge interest in the topic, and the working group would still need to decide what next steps are beyond that. So your question is absolutely relevant. Do we want to do protocol work? Do we want to do descriptive work? But we are not necessarily saying this is the document that we start with at in any way right now.
Yeah, but we need to start somewhere. Okay, cool.
Well, that's the question that we're asking is, do we need to start?
Yeah, true. The next presentation, thank you for your feedback, and the next presentation will be a very specific problem related to this.
Oh, just hold on. This one?
Yes.
All right, I'm Andrew McCormick with Ambit, and Arndt and I are going to talk about a specific use case as the previous one that kind of came up as we were talking about credential exchanges, and that is how do we deal with all of these things that just take static secrets like API keys. There is no draft for this yet, just kind of a measuring the room to see if this is something that is even worth picking up. So just kind of some background on what we see as the problem. There's still a large number of services out there that still use static secrets, API keys, passwords, things like that, instead of, modern standards-based authentication. And so, as much as people like to go to, SPIFFE and OIDC and things like that, there are just so many services that don't accept them. And then because these are all sort of proprietary implementations in each of these end services, the way each service handles API key creation, destruction, rotation, things like that is completely different. And so there is no consistent life cycle for all of this. It's different everywhere you go. And then because this is all different, they're generally stored in secrets managers. If you're lucky, there are much worse places where these are often stored, but I'm not going to get into that problem. But let's just make the assumption that you're putting them in a secrets manager. You still have to be able to authenticate to the secrets manager. There's a secret zero problem there where different secrets managers support different types of authentication, and some of them don't even support modern authentication to the secrets manager itself. And then, you've also got the operational burden of how do you manage them? How do you rotate them? How do you scope the access to them? Make sure that workloads can only get the static secrets they need, and then audit who's actually using the secret because it's just an API key. And then, there's all kinds of shortcuts that people do to make this work at scale. And that's the cause of a lot of breaches. Secrets end up in code. You use weak authentication to your secrets manager because it's easier. And so this kind of creates a lot of security problems that, ideally would be solved by things like WIMSE and SPIFFE and things like that. But the adoption curve for that of all of these third-party vendors that are using weak credentials is going to be a really long time if it ever happens. And so just kind of a quick overview of what we saw when we were looking at the market. We looked at about 36 secrets managers, and only 9 of them support authentication that doesn't require a client secret of some kind. Out of the 9, 5 of them are cloud providers. And the majority of the 27 that don't use bearer credentials. And so the 9 that do, they support a bunch of different APIs, and even when they implement JOT, for example, they don't implement it in the same way with the same endpoint in the same format. You kind of have to relearn every time you pick up a new secrets manager. There is no kind of shared interface between them or shared way to authenticate to them.
Yeah, so a quick flow, how it would normally look like. In the first step, the workload would authenticate to secrets manager. As Andrew just mentioned, most of the cases it's a client secret. And the secret manager would issue a secret manager specific sort of access token if they deploy OAuth or something else, session ticket, whatever. And then the second step, the workload would request a specific secret or a secret version from the secret manager, would get back that secret and then actually use the secret towards the service. Very common, and it also gets more and more common, unfortunately. Most of the LLMs do that. Yeah. And what we are thinking of focusing on the first step, how we use a workload identity to authenticate to a secret manager and get back a secret manager specific access token, session ticket, whatever that secret manager may use. Yeah, so questions to the working group would be, do you have experience in this problem, with this problem? Is there any precedence or prior art in this? And after all, like, should we work on this area?
You're on.
I have quite a bit of experience with the bottom turtle problem. Enough experience that I honestly thought the problem was solved, and I'm shocked to see your data, so thank you for that. I'm not sure we should be working on this because I think the evil people who are doing these terrible things are not our normal target audience. And personally, I suggest you look at OWASP work on non-human identity. I think that's likely to be a more appropriate place for this work.
Thank you.
Joe Salloway. Yeah, I think, I mean, this is an interesting problem. It's a problem I've spent a lot of time on, and probably a lot of people have. I think within WIMSE, I guess my question would be, wouldn't this be service to service off? Wouldn't that be the protocol there? And then it gets interesting on kind of the authorization pieces and all the other stuff that wasn't maybe in your scope. So I guess it could be interesting, but I think a lot of this kind of falls outside of maybe what the core WIMSE charter is. And I think the things that do, it would be just a small piece that you might be adding to it. But maybe I'm not getting the entire thing that you guys are thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. This is just kind of a very specific use case of service to service off. That's totally accurate. And it was kind of just a conversation that sprung up as we were talking about credential exchange of, like, you know, there is this other flavor of credential exchange where you now have to get this static thing and use that.
So I fully support previous comments. It doesn't feel that WIMSE is the right place for this work, but perhaps SPICE is something where actually this might land. So I would recommend pitching this at SPICE and see. Again, to me, I haven't read SPICE charter that well, skimmed through that, but it might fall into SPICE charter better than in WIMSE charter.
Hi, Ori Steele, your responsible AD. I agree with many of the comments from the folks who just spoke before me. I've been looking at our charter here kind of carefully as we prepared for the WebBot auth to sort of understand the overlap between OAuth, WIMSE, SPICE. And this is I also have in my day job a lot of experience with your presentation. I feel your pain. It is, in my opinion, connected to the service-to-service piece, but we have these two sort of deliverables in our charter here: the securing service-to-service traffic, which it's not really about securing service-to-service traffic, and then you have this token exchange bit, but it's very tied to the WIMSE token itself. So I think, you know, as I read the charter, this doesn't really fit cleanly within that, but you know, it's connected to some of your charter pieces. That's it.
Quick observation maybe from my side. This is an important problem. Thank you for presenting and sharing. I would propose that maybe continue to explore this document, maybe create a draft, and then we can have the charter discussions. It's also a little abstract right now, but this is an important problem. It's a huge thing in the industry. So thank you for bringing this to the working group.
Yes, and I encourage people to continue this conversation on the list. WIMSE is specifically chartered to allow for and encourage conversation on related topics that may not be quite exactly in our working remit. And this, to me, very clearly, at the very least, fits in that space. And it remains to be seen if there's more.
Okay, thank you. If you have experienced this problem, you would like to work with us on this, please reach out, and I guess see you in SPICE.
Thank you. Marcel.
Hi there. I'm Marcel Levy, and I'm here representing Hirsch Singhal from GitHub as well.
Oh, got it.
I'm a new participant. I'm here to not only participate, but to learn. And one of the things I've learned is that I've overloaded something, a term in the title of the draft. And so I'm here after seeing and contributing to years of bad practice. I see WIMSE as the right tool for the job, kind of like a can opener. But you know, practitioners use the tools at hand. There's lots of different ways to open a can in particular. You know, and so we use parts of other workflows to cobble together a working solution in the absence of something like WIMSE. And so, you know, for example, some improvised workflows have very sharp edges, again. And, you know, when I say sharp edges, we make choices, we're not focused on the larger trade-offs, and these have security implications. You can hurt yourself or other people. And so, so here we've got an illustration of the headless JOT message flow. And again, I've put an asterisk on there because it's overloaded. For one thing, I'm open to suggestions for renaming this. And what we're doing here, JOTs are extremely interoperable, which is why they get used all over the place. And we're using JOTs, we're also using parts of OIDC or maybe OAuth in a place where they're not necessarily intended, where we're using them for workloads. And you know, and so far so good, right? We can kind of see things that make sense. You know, there's an underlying system that is provisioning the workload with a JOT. You know, something like Spiffy does that as well. But that's not the only thing. That's not the only thing that does this sort of thing. GitHub Actions.
Marcel, can you stand closer to the mic, please?
Yes, GitHub Actions, for example, will do something similar, give you a JOT that you can then use to exchange for a different kind of token. And where the problems, I think, really come into play is when we talk about multi-tenancy. You know, again, you know, as by way of illustration, GitHub, for example. And then let's say you're trying to exchange that, you're trying to use that jot that you get from GitHub and trying to access a cloud provider with it. And again, we've got multi-tenancy on both sides. And you know, what you end up with there is that the practitioner who's trying to make this work, they may not understand the implications of the claims. You may be, you know, setting up policies on the IDP side with the, you know, what I'm calling here the exchange service, and I'm open to different names here, where they may, again, be opening up their account to compromise because they haven't really, you know, they haven't really thought things through. There's sharp edges between the interface between these two systems. And, you know, I think the WIMSE logo is kind of a perfect example of the problem because it's so intricate. We're talking about enterprise systems. These are systems that are composed of, you know, they have dimensions that cross time. You've got AS400s and Kubernetes running in the same system. You have organizational boundaries. You have a lot of different complexity within that, well, within the logo, to be honest. And I think that really illustrates what practitioners are dealing with. And so what we're proposing in this, what we've got in this draft is we're saying, look, we're documenting the patterns that people are using right now when they cobble together these things. And we're adding security considerations. We're trying to you know, alert people to the sharp edges. And this is important because while we are pushing forward towards a better standard, a better can opener, as it were, like these legacy systems are going to be surviving for quite some time, and they're still going to be performing these operations with workloads. Anyway, I'm here to see if this interests anyone in the working group, and you know, if so, I would encourage people to reach out and help.
Thank you, Marcel. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
I think that this could be interesting just because there are these sharp edges, and like I see people hurting themselves on them. So I think if we could clarify that, I guess I might have a question on if this fits in with the identity practices, the workload identity practices document in some way. Not sure, but maybe it does.
Thank you.
Arndt?
I also think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of security considerations related to it. Particularly, for example, when you talk about the multi-tenancy, we're seeing these two patterns in the industry where some provide dedicated keys per tenant, and some have a global tenant, a global key for every tenant, right? And particularly if the trust is established on JWKS, you trust every tenant and not just the tenant you're related to. And that has caused a lot of security implications and is such a big pitfall. So I think, yes.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Thanks, Arndt. Brian? Brian?
Arndt made me choose a bad seat. It's hard to get to the microphone. Thanks for acknowledging the overloading of the headless term. I was the one that was complaining about that because it confused me. I did have another kind of much more abstract, hard to address comment in that email thread, and that is that there feels like a huge overlap with a number of other pieces of existing work that people seem to continue to forget exist. And I don't know what to do about that, but I'm very reluctant to have yet another piece of work that does the same thing. And that's super non-actionable, but I feel like I need to at least air it.
I think that's the better point, to be honest, though, because
It's the more important one, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't address that with an asterisk. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I think I would have put that in. But yeah, I don't know what to say about it right now, but I would like to talk about that more.
Perfect.
Maybe a good follow-up. All right, thank you. Thanks, Marcel. Next up is Ramki. Let me share. Do you want me to advance the slides or will you advance them?
I can. Do you have remote control, Peter?
We do. I'm just trying to find your presentation. It's the zero cost sovereign AI. Is that the one?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And if you request, I can control. If you want me to, I'll just click forward as you instruct.
If I can control, that'll be great.
Can you request control?
Okay, 1 second. There is some unable to do so. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Okay. Thank you all. It's been a very interesting set of presentations. I'm here to talk about sovereign AI, the requirements, especially for data residency, and the importance of zero trust in this context, and how verifiable geofencing and proof of residency, all the verifiability is a critical piece for addressing zero trust. We have a draft in WIMSE. Please, it's on the list. Looking for your feedback, and I'd like to thank my co-authors Ned, Diego, Prasad, and Srini presenting on behalf of them. So we'll quickly cover the sovereign cloud, especially the data residency requirements, and we will look at the key industry problems and a solution summary with an example use case, sovereign cloud AI inferencing. And I'll summarize the key protocol changes and suggested next steps. Let's come to the data residency requirements. Though many people are familiar with this, but I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. It starts with several technical and regulatory challenges, right? There are several data protection regulations. For example, European Union deforestation regulations to the local legal mandates, example Saudi Arabia. And essentially, the critical aspect is you have to consider data protection in all of its lifecycle management, creation to destruction, and all the status in transit, in use, at rest. And what this comes to is a set of technical requirements, the host affinity, which means data storage and processing must be tied to very specific host. And then the geolocation affinity, which means the data must be stored, processed only in a defined geographic region. And it combined both the host and geolocation. We call it geofencing. Hosts are bound to specific geographic regions. Let's look at the sovereign cloud inferencing example use case and the problem. As you can see, there is an end user host, accessing a sovereign cloud AI application, basically AI inference application here in the center. And there is a key vault here where essentially the key is being retrieved by the inference application for decrypting the model, right? Basically the model is stored encrypted, right? And if you look at the end-to-end workflow, right? When it comes to host affinity, there are these key challenges, starting with bearer tokens. Basically, for example, bearer tokens could be stolen. It has occurred before several times. In fact, one of the important ones is the Okta breach. The next is, if you move beyond bearer tokens, you can go to proof of possession tokens, RFC 7800. It'll bind the private key to your token. But the important aspect to note is workload orchestrator security misconfiguration. I mean, there's a specific one called out by OWASP, in fact, can undermine these POP tokens, specifically by exposing the private key to unauthorized workloads. Unauthorized workloads can actually come in and then generate a private key and get a token attested, and also allowing valid workloads to execute in disallowed regions. So essentially, in summary, POP is not a solve all. So when it comes to geolocation affinity, the realization challenge are IP-based geofencing, where typically a firewall checks rules check the source IP offer only weak location guarantees. For example, attackers can easily bypass it using VPNs or IP spoofing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ramki, but we are pretty much already at time. We
I
apologize
have
for
one
the
more
packed
slide.
agenda. Yep, if you could wrap this,
I
so
have
that would
to.
be
I'll finish in
fantastic.
like under a minute. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
So basically, just to summarize the solution, right? What it really comes to addressing the barrier proof of possession token issue by proof of residency, where we cryptographically bind workload identity, executable code hash, or other properties, plus the approved host platform hardware identity, right? For example, TPM PKA key, hardware firmware version to generate a proof of residency workload certificate token, and then address the bearer proof of possession token and source IP issue by proof of geofencing, right? Where we cryptographically bind the proof of residency token plus additionally approved host platform location hardware identity to generate a POG workload certificate token. I will very quickly, I know, just because of
I'm very sorry. We are
lack of
over
time,
time.
I'm just going to go to the next one, the last. Okay, no problem.
Yes. Thank you. We do have 2 people in the queue. If you can be extraordinarily quick while we set up the next slides, that would be great.
So you've identified the right problem, but I think you should first do the architecture. Let's do claims about the workload, separate the claims about the server on which the workload runs, and then combine them and not go into special case design.
Thank you. I think kindly read the draft. Yeah.
Okay. Mark, did you have a question for this?
Seems we have drained the queue.
Okay. All right. Thank you again. Sorry for the short time on that one and this one. We have a very, very full agenda, as everybody has seen. So thank you for your flexibility.
Hi, I'm Mark Novak, and I'm here to represent a very inaccurately named draft that says extensions where we just want to say considerations. So I am an old hand at confidential computing, and I'm here representing a very large customer that basically...
Mark, can you stand closer to the mic or tilt it up, or just take hold of it?
Okay, so I'm here representing a very large customer that basically has every scenario you can think of in the workload identity space. We have thousands of applications. We respond to over 100 different regulators, and we have several high-risk locations that I'm not going to name. However, here is a scenario we need to run in, and WIMSE, I think at its core, hasn't really thought about it when it was architected, but we have a regulator that basically says, run malware on the server or you cannot operate in our jurisdiction, all right? That's a real-world scenario. You can guess which jurisdiction it is. It's not France, although soon it might be. Now, the confidential computing you can learn about, it's effectively something that completes the trifecta of data in use, data at rest, and data in transit protection. And it's getting increasingly more important because of IoT, because of public clouds, because of multiple jurisdictions, etc. And WIMSE is generally compatible with it. And that's the key point is you don't really need to change WIMSE to work with confidential computing, but you need to remember a couple of things. Confidential computing requires workload isolation, but it also enforces it on its own terms. It is something that absolutely requires credential binding, right? So if you're using bearer tokens, you're probably not confidential computing compatible, and you will leak the bank's secrets in a hostile jurisdiction. So not a good idea. And WIMSE generally stays away from credential issuance, but in the architecture, it mentions this thing called the agent. And this is the harks back to the idea that WIMSE basically says, well, you know, we want our hosting environment to give us credentials. Under confidential computing, that cannot work because the workload effectively needs to attest itself to obtain its credentials. And if it's fine to use the agent, but then the agent is part of the workload, right? So I just, you know, I'm here keeping an eye on conversations, and I'm hoping to remind people that in a very important and soon very large number of instances where WIMSE is used, you know, you'll just have to think about how to do that, and I'm happy to participate in discussions on, you know, that. So please read our draft. A bunch of stuff you can read about confidential computing. There was a working group inside the Confidential Computing Consortium, which I chair, that is called Trustworthy Workload Identity. We have a charter. You can click on the link and you can read it. Feel free to shoot me an email. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Mohammed.
On slide 4, you had the definition of confidential computing, and we had a paper on that. We had a lot of back and forth between us and Confidential Computing Consortium. If you go back to slide 4, so confidential computing does not work without attestation. And the definition you have here does not say anything about attestation. They revised their definition, and now the new definition contains attested hardware-based trusted execution environment. So I will suggest to update that. And secondly, you say utilizes remote attestation. It's not necessarily, from that perspective, it's not necessarily required to have a separate verifier. You could have a verifier within the relying party, so to say, like a verifying relying party. So it's not absolutely required to have that communication. You could have that entity within that relying party.
Joe.
Yeah, so happy to make changes to the architecture document to kind of incorporate the different kind of modes of operation, because I recognize that there are lots of different ways to do things, but we should define the ones that are important there. And I think we only have that, we haven't clarified it. So I'm happy to work with you on that.
So again, WIMSE and Peter and I have had conversations about this. We're absolutely happy with WIMSE staying out of the credentials issuance business, right? But we meet weekly. You can join our mailing list, join our meetings. It's a completely open environment. We will also be working extensively with the RATS working group at the IETF. But here I'm simply, just drawing your attention to the fact that you will be running alongside malware in the world out there. That is mandated. It's not a suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just as a process reminder, Confidential Computing Consortium is not under the IETF umbrella. Any contributions to that are under their IPR regulations, not ours. So please do keep that in mind as you engage. Thank you, Mark.
Still Linux Foundation, but not IETF.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Mark.
All right, and that brings us to the end of the meeting. We have... I'm going to open up the mic queue if anybody has anything else to add. But in the meantime, Peter and I have been taking notes of a bunch of chair actions. We will be scheduling at least 17 interims before Montreal. So we want to make sure we get all of those in. Brian will be in attendance at every single one because he's actually running the content on all of them. But no, for real though, we're going to be coming to the list to schedule a few interims, mostly for the current drafts. We want to encourage continued work on the individual drafts, and I'm hearing a lot of chatter and excitement towards last call for a handful of documents. I would love to see us get a bunch of these into the last call state before Montreal, so let's please get those over the line, folks, and especially keeping in mind all of the sort of the excitement about the new individual drafts and proposals that came up today. We got to get stuff done before we start new things. And so if we want to work on new things, we really got to push things to the end, to their conclusion.
Right. Thank you, Justin. I don't see anybody in the queue or at the mics. So working group last call for Montreal for at least 3 documents.
Yeah, if we can. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you on the list. Peter and I will post the notes, and we'll send out a whole bunch of polls to you guys in the next couple of weeks to get things scheduled and moved along. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.